Hello and welcome to the Dominion League I-tier Championship final between Enea, and iMonster. Um, both won their semi-final after finishing top in their I division. And the format is first to 3.5. Enea is the higher seed, having done slightly better in the league season, so they will be going first. I did a quick look at where these players have been. So iMonster in the grey, quite a tenured player, hovered mainly around FGH, and Enea, a slightly newer player who has been as high as F, but both just won in I. So let's get into this kingdom. We have Transmogrify is kind of thinning. Seller is filtering. Broker is pretty good trashing. Unfortunately, iMonster has their hand hidden. Broker seems pretty good to open as well. I think Maroon is also pretty good trashing. And upgrade as well. Yeah, lots of different thinning options on this board. The draw is probably going to be Margrave. It could be Library, but I think it's I think Margrave is just better here. And yeah, the payload maybe like Merchants, Sculptor for silvers. You can upgrade 3s into 4s into 5s into 6s. So what were the opens? 5-2 Sculptor, Seller, and Upgrade Seller. I would say Upgrade seems like a stronger open because you do really want to get thin fast before you start trying to add engine pieces with Sculptor. But yeah, long term, I think Sculptor will be good to gain throne rooms. You can like Throne Merchant, Throne Margrave, upgrade. First one was Estate into Silver, which I agree with. I think maybe second one is also into Silver, and then from then on you can try and gain more merchants depending on how it's going. On the 2, I think the Seller is probably okay. We can always upgrade it later if we run out of use for it, but the early cycling is probably quite valuable. Yeah, I would have expected upgrade as first 5, then probably Margrave as second 5. Tmog may be useful later. I guess it's kind of situational in terms of potentially turning like silvers into 4s or maybe 4s into 5s. And obviously the later game will have province threat. Probably we would want to build to like double province, I would imagine. I think more than that seems a bit ambitious. But yeah, should be at least to double. I guess Library could be okay against the Margrave attack, but probably you just want to be playing more Margrave in response to it. Enea does take the first Margrave, which seems good. A bit unfortunate to draw Margrave dead there. Probably pick up a merchant. Maybe they trashed their silver already, because I remember they trashed it with maroon not so long ago. Um, Banquet is it's not unreasonable here. The thinning is quite good. But I think a merchant is like very reasonable. I don't think we're thin enough to the point where we need to use banquet for the extra kind of gains. And those coppers will definitely be getting in the way. So Enea managed to save a villager from their last turn, which will come in very handy here. Another option they could take, which would maybe conserve the villager, is to transmogrify their silver into a throne room, and then they could do throne maroon, and potentially play into whichever action they draw, which I would be quite tempted by. We can always gain silver off sculptor later. Yeah, I like this play a lot. You can do another throne. Sculptor, what do we want to gain? Maybe silver merchant? Yeah, I definitely think these one silver is good, and then I think the second silver should have been a merchant, which you then could have throned, and you knew you were already lining up with the silver. But a pretty good turn. And gets a second Margrave, which I do like. So iMonster did open with the upgrade, but doesn't seem to have been getting that thin. They trash silver into throne room, which is maybe a tad early for it. Like throne room's obviously a good card, but it's you need to line it up with an action, which early on in the game is not super guaranteed. So potentially early upgrade plays could be more focused on thinning the coppers. Although obviously maroon is better at the coppers, and then upgrade is good for the estates because you can then turn them into the nice threes. What did I miss? Sculpt for silver, play Margrave, bought a gold. Yeah, gold is probably not the ideal payload here because it's quite expensive. And if you have 6, you'd probably rather be buying the good actions like Margrave, Sculptor, Upgrade. And then payload, I would say, comes more from Sculptor and Merchants. Yeah, see, this is the kind of dud that could happen with Throne Room, but fortunately they had a Transmogrify down on their tavern mat, which did manage to save the turn. They chose to trash Throne into Sculptor, which I would say is quite reasonable. I would have been maybe tempted to take like Silver into Merchant or something like that. Um, Obviously, you would ideally want to be tracking what you had down in the rest of your deck to know how likely it was for you to draw into another action. Seaway Throne Room, I think makes sense. I like they do have 2 Margraves, which should be enough plus buy. But I guess they didn't find either of them that turn, and I do like that they didn't take the province just because they had 9 and no buys. I definitely agree with the what's the saying? Yeah, with gaining something, and yeah, Seaway Throne Room seems pretty reasonable. One thing about Margrave that I quite like that's a bit different from the other discard attacks is the extra card it draws. So you do discard down to 3, but because you keep drawing and discarding, you kind of filter through to help you find a decent 3-card starting hand. So yeah, there's certain situations where you don't want to play with too much Margrave because it will enable your opponent's deck to be super reliable. But here it's pretty much the only draw, so not a consideration. I don't like those sculptor gains because I think it's super valuable to have villagers stored up, and we could have gained silvers off of the sculptor, and then yeah, bank those villagers for later, which would have been like potentially useful. For example, if we had a hand that just had Margrave in it, then yeah, we would want to obviously continue the turn, but you'd need to use a villager for that. I also don't think we need that much cellar. At this point, our deck is doing pretty well, and yeah, it doesn't necessarily need more filtering. You could add just like more regular draw, like Margraves. But yeah, second cellar seems a bit cautious. They do definitely feel like they're in the lead, however. So I think probably one sculptor can gain throne room. You can throw in the other sculptor, and then, or just 2 silvers. We could have gained 2 silvers off the second one and just gotten like a free throne room with that. But that's okay. And another thing, it's slightly awkward with merchant, but if we had counted, we knew we had an extra 1 coin, so we could have trashed a copper, which would make us slightly more consistent. But I definitely like the double province, and I like the extra Margrave being added. Yeah, definitely playing very well so far. iMonster using Throne Room Sculptor as like a village to gain 2 silvers, which comes with 2 villagers, which is a nice way to kick off their turn. Seems quite possible to me that Enea could win this turn. They have so much plus buy from throne rooms, and they can sculpt 2 more throne rooms, probably pile cellars, and also empty the curses. I'm not super expecting that to happen, and it's definitely not necessary. But yeah, definitely always nice to try and win when you can. Yeah, but like it's not one that you go for from the start of the turn. I think it's one where you try and draw and then see where you are at the end. But definitely one, I guess, to bear in mind, which I always try and remember, is when you have a lot of plus buy, then the curse pile can empty quite quickly. And you just need enough of a points lead, which they do at the moment. They're gonna need to play merchant here. That's not true, actually. No, they've got a villager, so they could play Margrave one more time. I think they've got 2 more thrones down there. I could be wrong. But I also think maybe they only have 1 sculptor. So they could sculpt for 2 thrones. Only 1 throne down there. So you can sculpt for 2 thrones. No, they do have 2 sculptors. So, yeah. I think the one was there. Well, yeah, it was definitely, the win was definitely there, but definitely a difficult one. One that you wouldn't necessarily think of, and one that you absolutely don't need to try and find. Yeah, just triple province. I think the cellar is okay. Potentially worth turning Maroon into. We see a resignation anyway. Yeah, well played by Enea. This seems like a pretty crazy kingdom that is going to be very difficult to play optimally. The main thing that sticks out to me is Hermit Journey, where you can play Hermit, and normally you have to kind of skip your buy phase to get the Madman. But with Journey, you can buy Journey. It doesn't count as gaining any cards, so you get to exchange the Hermit for a Madman, and then you still get the extra turn from Journey, which I think works even though Journey says keep cards in play, because the Hermit is exchanged at the end of your buy phase rather than when you discard it from play. So I'm pretty sure that works, and yeah, that's going to be quite speedy, coupled with Way of the Horse shenanigans, and we have Goat Herd for copper trashing. Means that yeah, this is going to be a pretty explosive kingdom, potentially. And I would expect Vineyards to be pretty good for scoring. Um, Obviously, the main gainer is Hermit, which can only gain guides and goat herds. But yeah, you can still get a bunch of those, and then buy, your galleys, thrones, um, villas, etc. On the flip side, I think Soothsayer is, well, it generally encourages more province games, but doesn't seem super strong here because Hermit is able to trash from the discard pile, and Soothsayer draws them a card. So yeah, I guess it's not super impactful as a cursor, but it should be um, decent if you want the golds. Um, there's also a slim chance of the recent, I say recent, it was not that recent anymore, but the duration errata around Royal Galley style things where if you galley a throne room and then that throne room plays a galley, you can end up accidentally stranding cards forever. Um, which I don't think is super likely to happen, but would be sad if someone did that without realizing. I see a lot of people, um, not necessarily complaining, but mentioning that they found the duration rules easier beforehand when it was more about having to remember stuff that was out of play to track it. But yeah, I definitely disagree. Like this specific interaction where you can strand things is quite weird, but on the whole, only having to remember something when it's right in front of you makes a lot of sense to me. Anyway, what have these players been doing? Both went Hermit Innkeeper. I would say Journey on the 4 seems better. Then got Silver, Hermit, Trash's Estate. iMonster not going for the Madman, which I would say, um, yeah, I think it's difficult to evaluate Madman without playing with it more. It's definitely not one of those cards that I expect maybe less experienced players to kind of appreciate the like pacing advantage it gives you from getting the Madman. Um, One thing I would say is that you want to kind of gain another Hermit with your Hermit before you exchange it for a Madman, so that you still have a Hermit to use, especially when you still have estates left. Like maybe when you've run out of estates and there's nothing else good to gain, then you don't need your Hermit anymore. But definitely at this stage of the game for Enea, you want your Hermit for the estates, and also now when your opponent is cursing you, you definitely want your Hermit. iMonster has a goat herd. Enea has a goat herd as well. Unfortunately, misses with Royal Galley. Journey as well, potentially a card that is underrated. Um, yeah, the ability to have an extra turn is obviously like sounds very nice, but maybe this downside of not being able to use any of the cards you just played in this turn seems quite high, or it could just be kind of the opportunity cost of not buying something else. But yeah, in these decks, even if all you do is maybe trash a curse that your opponent gave you and give out a curse yourself, that seems like a very good use of a journey turn. One other rules thing with Madman is that it will be returned to its pile. So if you play Galley and then play the Madman with the Galley, you won't be able to play again next turn, so that would be a bit of a waste of the galley, which yeah, I did fear was going to happen. Potentially a villa now to get plus buy would be pretty useful. Nice. Oh, well, we didn't get the plus buy, but I guess we did get to curse. That's definitely one that I still forget. I think the main one I forget with is owl, where I'll buy a villa and then owl it and then realize that I don't have any buys left. Yeah, I do think, like, in principle, gaining a villa just to horse it does seem pretty strong, but yeah, in that situation, probably getting the plus buy is going to pay off more in the long run. So I would say, without knowing the rest of the hand, gaining another hermit and then hopefully buying journey would be my recommendation. Yeah, which they did have enough money for the journey. Based on the amount of soothsayering, I'm gonna predict that they start going for provinces soon. Yeah, I'm not super convinced on vineyards here, but I think it's likely that they will be slightly quicker than provinces. I think Enea just did the same villa thing. I'm not sure if they're doing it knowingly or maybe they forgot about the lack of buy. But yeah, it's definitely easy to do, especially when the most similar card to villa, in a sense, cavalry does give you the plus buy when you gain it, so you can do those tricks with cavalry and then buy something else. Definitely a question whether you galley goat herd or galley soothsayer. I could see it either way. This seems like a good case for journey, but just a gold. I would say if you want a gold, you can journey, probably play a soothsayer, and then you'll gain a gold, and also you'll look in your opponent a curse. So yeah, definitely journey not being. I'm not sure it's been used at all, but yeah, definitely underutilized. I think it's quite early in the game to be buying a state, especially when you're just about to shuffle. The victory point could matter, but I think what's more likely to matter is the fact that you have to draw past this estate at some point later in the game, which might make you miss province or miss something else. So yeah, generally you don't want to be buying estates unless it's like absolutely last ditch. You have to score. even to some extent duchies as well. You don't want to start buying those too early because they will hinder your ability to get provinces, which are ultimately a more efficient way of scoring. I like horsing soothsayers now. They've kind of outlived their use. This seems like a good journey. Probably you just take the province there, I would say. What is Monster looking at? I think we're at the point of the game where you can be horsing your innkeeper there. Obviously, I don't know what the rest of their hand was, but I think at the very most, what you would want to do is the +3, -3. The +5, -6 is very punishing hand size wise. Like as you can see, they're obviously down to a 3-card hand after that. Enea does hit province and takes it. A bit of a gamble in terms of hoping that iMonster can't. Now, definitely at this point, if you can't hit province but you hit 4, you need to be taking journey because the duchy will not protect you from your opponent being able to, like, if your opponent takes province, which seems quite likely, then you weren't enough points ahead. But yeah, quite unlucky, I think, to only hit 7 there. But yeah, definitely journey as the consolation prize could have potentially saved it without knowing what the next hand was. This kingdom doesn't really have a village in that there's Prince, but Prince is super awkward and expensive. It seems quite reasonable to maybe play with, like, not really a terminal. It's quite awkward though. Like groom is kind of tempting on the open because then you can groom for magpies, but once the magpies run out, then you don't really have any good things to groom for. So I think I agree with magpie on the 4, and probably the 3. If it's the 4-3, I definitely like burying the magpie and then taking a bobble. Bobble. However, and the 3-4, maybe just bauble magpie. Magpie is obviously very good in more of a money style deck, which this looks like it could be. I think the existence of island folk does encourage a bit more building than you would otherwise hear. So potentially getting a princed magpie down and playing with more like magnate draw could be good here, but it's very awkward to set up. Trashing is also not very good with just dismantle. which is not terrible in like a money deck. You can dismantle the estates into copper gold, which I think is okay. I wouldn't say Skulk is all that relevant because you also gain a gold off Skulk, but then the Skulk is there, which is pretty awkward. The other way to gain golds would be Pirate, which I think is quite good here as well. And we have Invasion, which gains loots, but comes with a Duchy, which you probably don't want. And yeah, not really many attacks to use the first part here. But you can gain a Prince with Invasion, so that's probably the main use case that I see. If you hit 10, you can take a Prince. Yeah, I think I would probably do that. And yeah, Island Folk, I guess, as I was mentioning with Journey beforehand, extra turns are super valuable. So with a liaison where you get one favor per turn, like Bauble, then you need 3 of them to have consistent Island Folk turns. Because you can play, well, you need 5 favors essentially across your 2 turns. So you can play 3 on one turn, 2 on another, or ideally 3 on both turns. And then, yeah, every turn you get to have an Island Folk turn as well. Anyway, where have we been? So, both went Silver Magpie. Very reasonable open. I think a lot of the game could come down to Magpie luck. There's definitely, like, it's maybe counterintuitive, but early game you definitely want your Magpie to find estate most boards, so you get to gain more Magpies. And then obviously later in the game, you want, when the Magpies have run out, you want your Magpies to find treasure. And both hit 5 and take a pirate on their first shuffle. Monster with a bauble, which I like. Unfortunately, triggering Enea's pirate. We do see a Grim, which is, I think it could be good. I would be a bit wary of it, but yeah, it can definitely help swing the like Magpie gaining if you gain a couple more separately, like not from the Magpie ability. Pendant seems reasonable as a treasure. I think probably maybe not super likely that it's going to be more than gold. And might be better to be gaining treasures off pirate. But yeah, it seems reasonable. There's definitely sometimes situations, I guess it would be depending on their hand, where you don't want to react pirate when your opponent gains a pirate, because sometimes you'd much rather have. Yeah, I like this invasion. I would put Prince on top. I don't know if they have a Magpie there, so maybe if they don't have a Magpie, then don't put a Prince on top. But yeah, I think it could be pretty valuable to have that terminal space, and then we can play with Magnate and really start drawing, hopefully. Sexton is really nice as well. That could help line up the Prince with a Magpie. Yeah, Sexton very nice in these kind of more sloggy decks. I guess Goat would be good as well, but in terms of Goat being, I guess, quite slow, like every time you play it, you get to thin 1 card, which is nice, but every time you play Sextant, you potentially discard 5 junk cards. So it can often outpace. Yeah, I think more pirate seems reasonable enough. If iMonster gains a treasure, then Enea will be able to hit invasion next turn. Another thing you can do when you're at the end of your shuffle, like Enea is here, when you get invasion, you can, I guess, assuming you don't get Sexton and trigger a shuffle, but you could then bury one of your magpies to guarantee lining up with Prince. Changeling. Yeah, Changeling can gain Prince now, which I had not thought about. But yeah, makes every subsequent Prince quite a lot cheaper. Buried something. Hopefully buried some, like a magpie. Is that true? Well, we don't know where the Prince is, I guess. But in general, you would want to bury your draw to put it on top. Well, on bottom, which is on top. I would like a magnate for monster. You can put one on top here, which could be super nice depending on what's down there. It's hard for it not to be good, I think, with these deck compositions. So take favor top deck and put a magnate on top. Pirate's not terrible, but if you think about pirate in terms of your whole deck, one extra gold when you've already got quite a lot of payload is not increasing the average output that much. Whereas one magnate could draw 3, 4, 5 cards, whose average output, I would imagine, will be better than gold. So yeah, they're definitely like good to, yeah, not over add payload. You can add some payload, but also try and add draw when you can. And here, when you've got the Prince set up, it's a perfect opportunity to add some terminal draw cards, since you have essentially a village at the start of your turn. Aenea's Prince unfortunately missed Magpie, so they will have to settle for Prince Groom, which is okay. Definitely not as good. But yeah, obviously better than Prince missing everything. I wonder if you put Magnate on top now. I know they have another Prince somewhere. So yeah, I like that. That could be really nice. You can probably trash an estate here. I'm assuming one of those is an estate. Yeah, nice. And I think just more Magpie. Or you could bury something. I'm not sure what's in the discard pile at the moment. Could also take more Bauble. Changing for probably Prince. Get a nice Magpie here. Should be at least a few treasures in hand with that Magnate, I would expect. Obviously, if you have more Magpies, you should probably draw those. Um, Another one to consider is if you have two terminals and one of them draws cards and one of them doesn't, you should play the one that draws cards first in most situations. Because you can imagine that that magnate drew you more magpies, and then you could play the extra magpies, and then at the end, when you've run out of other magpies, you have prince one magpie, you can play the prince on the magpie. Whereas that way round, if you prince the magpie and then play magnate, any new magpies you draw, you won't be able to play them. So yeah, like there are exceptions, but general rule, play the cards that give you more information in the form of, you know, more draw or things like that, first. Enea lines up Prince Horse, which is really nice. Yeah, because the horse would normally return to its pile, but the prince specifically says play the card, leaving it set aside. So when you prince a horse at the start of every turn, you draw those two cards, you get one action, and the horse stays on the prince. So yeah, effectively you're starting with a 7-card hand and 2 actions. Yeah, those changing buttons can be quite annoying. Yeah, I think it's probably okay to start provincing now. Mainly because at this point there's a lot of payload in these decks, but they're not quite consistently drawing. So it would be difficult to try and set up Island Folk turns. Having said that, I definitely think more Magnate would be good. Like we have 2 Magpies set aside. So we can put at least 2 Magnates in deck, probably more. Enea just printing Magpie there. I would put Magnate on top there. I think Magnate is going to do more for us than Prince will. Definitely at this stage in the game. The piles are getting a bit scarily low. Wow, this is a really big turn for iMonster. Triple Province, I think, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you can imagine if this Prince was a Magnate, we would have 6 cards of draw coming from it. Yeah, like obviously this is worst case for the Prince because it's missed, but yeah, I don't think it was super likely to hit, and even if it did hit an action, not going to be as good as having a magnate in this hand. Yeah, just the double province, but iMonster can presumably province at least here, potentially double. So definitely seeming a likely winner. I think at this point we can kind of give up on the dream of getting to 5 favors for the Island Folk turn. So yeah, maybe taking coin would have been better there, and then you could have got an extra berry or an estate buy, depending on how much you think your opponent's deck can do. But I definitely would gain estate with the groom. I think it's going to help your turn quite a lot, and also the points are quite valuable. I guess you'd want to count how much money you need before you decide whether to trash with goat. Yeah, just taking double duchy, but with pirate and the 2 prince magpies in play, yeah, it's pretty much guaranteed to be in hand, and we can see their hand now. But yeah, look at the power of magnate there, drawing 8 cards. Not that unrealistic once you have 2 princes out, and even once you had 1 prince out, magnate was going to be doing a lot of work for you. Combining with the pendant and all the loots from invasion, we could have been building very, very big here. Yeah, like you can see the payload here is pretty crazy. But yeah, well played by iMonster in that one. Oh, this is a bit of an ugly one. So wall is obviously making this a lot sadder than it otherwise would be, where you can imagine playing with a bunch of universities, cavalry, all that. As it is, yeah, I guess focus on keeping a thin deck, and probably junking your opponent is going to be quite relevant. And obviously, yeah, cavalry gaining horses is kind of gaining you negative points if you think about it. But I do think cavalry is very good here. At least like early in the game, and particularly with arms, one thing that is really nice, and I would hope that both players would consider this as part of their opening, is you can arms for cavalry, which is essentially drawing you 2 cards for free and getting your cavalry, which maybe you don't want the cavalry, but you get to draw 2 cards, which could enable you to hit 5 in the open for Tanuki, which is a very strong opener. It's basically remodel, except it's a shadow card, and that means 2 things. It means 1, you don't have to draw it into your hand, so it's essentially remodel with +1 card attached, and 2, you get to choose when you play it, so you can wait until you have an estate in hand that you want to Tanuki into something. as opposed to if you open remodel, there's a chance that you draw remodel and 4 coppers, and then you're very sad. So yeah, Tanuki very strong open, and our arms for cavalry would be a good way of trying to get that. Definitely like more likely on the 4-3 than the 3-4, but I think trying it on the 3-4 is probably worth it as well. Both players opened potion. iMonster opening cavalry without the arms trick, which is slightly worse depending on what you draw. Enea opened double potion, which is quite good. I think they might have just noticed. Double potion is quite good at getting university. It's not very good at getting familiar. And I would say because of wall, familiar is probably a lot more appealing than university. Yeah, they did the arms cavalry trick, which is cool. I like arms a lot. It's a very nice event. Yeah, I would say university. It's not crazy, but it's going to be. Yeah, so you can't do arms twice in one turn. But yeah, armsing for cavalry once is very nice. And what was I saying? Okay, so yeah, the university gains, like university is a very nice card and can be very strong, but yeah, heavily penalized by wall. But if we are playing with it, I would say probably you want to be gaining a couple of Tanukis, and then probably some jousts. Black Cat could be relevant here. No one's gone for it, which is interesting. It's probably not that relevant a lot of the time when there's another cursor in the kingdom. Like Familiar here, you can imagine a lot of kingdoms with Black Cat and Familiar where the cursors will run before people start buying green cards. But Joust is encouraging the game in the slightly different direction, encouraging people to get province earlier, which does make Black Cat a bit more dangerous. iMonster does have Tanuki, but also has a load of cards in deck already. Some of those will be horses, which is fine. You can play those, and yeah, obviously they'll leave your deck, but you don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to end up with too many things. This is a lot of potions being gained. I would say 1 is typically enough for pretty much all of the potion cost cards apart from Vineyards. It's, I guess, quite rare where you want to be gaining 2 universities or 2 familiars in a turn. Not impossible, and yeah, definitely with Vineyard you want to gain lots of Vineyards at once, and maybe Scrying Pool you want to get a second potion. But yeah, I would say 1 is probably enough on this board. I would like to see, more Tanukiing, and then people trying to line up Joust with Province to get their rewards. Yeah, pretty sad that this kingdom has wall. Although I do enjoy playing with wall from time to time. Especially with like no actual thinning. So you can Tanuki one card into another card, but you can't actually reduce the number of cards in your deck. So, with the exception of horses, so all of these actions you're getting for university, while they are obviously lovely, um, yeah, they're all negative points for you. I feel like iMonster in particular maybe needs to be a bit careful. Um, yeah, I think familiar is worth it here because like your own familiar is negative, but you will hand out quite a few curses. Um, yeah, iMonster is really enjoying the cavalry gain effect, but once you've gained the cavalry, then it's in your deck, and then it's doing something completely different, which is often less than ideal. I would say maybe Coronet or Housecarl, depending on the hand that we're looking at. Could be Corsair. Housecarl is like really, really nice draw, which this kingdom is definitely lacking a little bit. Um, if the decks were looking a bit different, I would consider Domain because I'd want to be gaining golds to Tanuki into Province. But yeah, I feel like both players are going to do well to get above 0 VP, which is maybe not a great sign. Um, I would be tempted to do the arms for cavalry thing here. Arms for caravan seems okay. Um, again, caravan it's kind of almost a lab, which is yeah, it's good to have a lot of them normally, but yeah, not with wall around. iMonster just noticed wall, and after commenting on that, then gained two more cards with university. Um, more Tanuki seems in order, I would say. Because while it doesn't reduce the number of cards in your deck, it is at least not increasing them. If you buy a province, that's only effectively 5 points because you've got one extra card in deck. Whereas if you Tanuki into province, then that's kind of equivalent to the whole 6 points. We could also be turning a few of these cavalries into duchy because we do have a lot of them. We can definitely get rid of potion at this point, I would say. It's not very likely that any more familiars we buy will be played. Curse into something also seems reasonable. Black Cat, maybe less good. Obviously, like, curse into a state is kind of sad as well, but it is at least 2 points. But yeah, I think I would have liked Cavalry into Duchy there. No, Potion into Duchy, I mean. We don't really want to keep playing these Cavalries because, they're getting us 2 horses, which, unless we can draw around and play, are minus 2 points. And yeah, definitely for iMonster, we're not going to get around another shuffle. Definitely should have done the Cavalry thing before Tanuki, because potentially they drew an action there that they then couldn't play. But yeah, to be fair, I think that was just one of those cases where they played Tanuki and then they remembered, oh, I can arms for Cavalry, and then they didn't think to go back an extra step, which is fair enough. I wonder what is in hand. Market's a pretty good start. If we find a familiar, we could be winning. If we find a university, we should definitely not get an action card. University is optional, and we don't want to be doing that. The estate is not good to buy. Not just for Black Cat reasons, but also, all the VP has this -1 point tacked on it from wall, and if you take 1 off of the estate, that is 0 points. Which is kind of another reason that wall encourages a bit more early greening, aside from the obvious fact that you don't want to have too many cards in deck, so you don't need to build that big. But also it makes it harder to catch up on duchies, because each duchy is kind of only 2 points, whereas a province is 5, so you need more duchies per province that your opponent has. But yeah, 3-1 to Enea. And yeah, this is first to 3.5, so match point for them. And they are going first, so they do have the advantage. This is a pretty awkward one, again, with like bad trashing and coupled with bad draw. Yeah, super awkward. I don't know what I do here. With Lucky Coin, we can kind of get like a flood of silvers, so it often encourages more money-ish games rather than engines. Silos is often very nice. Here, when there's no estate trashing, you're at a risk of cycling away your coppers and then drawing estates, which is not good. So you could consider maybe Trader to turn your estates into silvers, but that's really very slow. Yeah, the one thing that does encourage more of an engine would be like colonnade, I guess, where these colonnade points could be relevant if one player gets a lot more than the other. There's also kind of merchant guild mega turn potential where ideally on your penultimate turn you play a lot of merchant guilds and buy a lot of cards, and then you'll at the end of your buy phase get loads of coffers, and then the next turn after that you can use all those coffers to buy a load of provinces. But that is going to be very awkward to set up with Royal Blacksmith as the draw. So yeah, I think probably a moneyish thing would be tough to beat. Gladiator is okay, I guess. Occasionally better than silver. Fool, I don't mind. I think hero would play fool. Yeah. Yeah, probably take wind first. Then you can discard if you want to. Put something on top. We do have estates down there, so you could put trader on top. But they go for gladiator, which also seems reasonable. I didn't realize we had both gladiators over here. So what has iMonster been doing? They opened 5-2. They got Merchant Guild, which is not typically a card you want to open, but there aren't really many good options here anyway. But yeah, definitely I think the 5-2 is worse than the 4-3. They got a trader. They got Harbor Village. Yeah, pretty difficult to line up the Harbor Village with the Merchant Guild. So I think often in unreliable decks, Walled Village kind of, I'm not going to say shines, but isn't as boring as normal. Because if you have a few turns where you just play Village and then you don't find your like any more actions, you can put the Village on top and try again next turn. So it helps the collision case in these kind of junky, unreliable decks. Whereas Harbor Village really relies on if you find the Harbor Village and then you play Merchant Guild and then you get this bizarre peddler thing effect. Yeah, which is not super likely. So I think I would go for Walled Village here. Definitely at the start of the game. Maybe if you get consistency, then you can add in the Harbor Villages. But it seems quite difficult. And then the other village would be Royal Carriage, which is nice with payload things like Merchant Guild, where you're going to play them at the end of turn and you want to play them lots of times. I guess kind of similar to Bridge in a sense where yeah, it pairs nicely with Royal Carriage because you can play them all at the same time with only one action cost. That's not a very good draw. Are we just going to trade the estate? Play the blacksmith. Not unreasonable. It's definitely going to be difficult to line up the blacksmith with a village. Particularly because I'm not sure Enea has one, unless I missed it. Well, I guess they have carriage, which is kind of a village if you play on Wisp. But yeah, also pretty awkward. they wasted their Lost in the Woods Fields gift as well this turn. Well, not that you can plan for that, obviously. We do get fortune. We've got 2 fortunes now, do we? Or someone has 2. Which is typically too many because the second one you play doesn't do anything apart from the plus buy. But yeah, I think in this situation where we're not reliably drawing, 2 could be reasonable. Although at the same time, if you're not drawing very much, then there's limited payoff for fortune anyway over just like a gold or something. But yeah, super awkward kingdom. Another thing with the new debt rules where you can pay it off anytime, you got to make sure you don't accidentally pay off your debt before you play your fortune. Because yeah, if you have, let's say 5, and you played fortune, you get 10. But if you paid off 2 debt, went down to 3, then you played your fortune, you'd only have 6. So you're effectively paying off your debt twice. If that made any sense with my explanation. But yeah, I think no one's done that yet. I do feel like the players are trying to play almost like both decks. Like they seem to be adding a lot of money, but also Merchant Guild, or maybe that's just iMonster, which doesn't super work. I would also say like Royal Blacksmith in these decks with lots of copper in it doesn't work very well. But yeah, I can't really blame them too much. It's a pretty horrible kingdom, and I would honestly have been tempted to. Yeah, I would have been tempted to play like trader money or something like really boring. I guess you buy a harbor village just for the colonnade points. Because those are pretty nice to have. Yeah, it seems like gold would be a less likely card for them to have than silver, just based off the numbers gone. But it didn't matter either way in terms of us hitting province. iMonster buying coppers to give them coffers from Merchant Guild is definitely a thing that comes up, but I would say more so when you have 3, 4, 5 Merchant Guilds in play compared to just one. Because yeah, those coppers do get in the way later. Pretty unrelated, but I was just thinking. I think the main case where you would take coppers, apart from Merchant Guild, to get coffers would be like Guildhall Banquet, which is a pretty powerful combo. This is turning into a pretty nice turn. I would have considered trying to draw again, but I guess knowing that you have a blacksmith down here, yeah, stopping is correct. But I think they have another fortune here, so could potentially have another big turn. But that's really the benefit of the royal carriage. Because it is much more likely to line up with the card that you want to play with. Yeah, those two turns really, really strong for Enea. I wasn't too sure, because there's been a lot going on, who was in the lead, but yeah, definitely Enea at this point. I think triple duchy seems reasonable there. I can also see province duchy being quite reasonable. Because sure, you might lose if you take the province, because the provinces will run out, but sometimes you kind of have to think, like, how likely is it that I will come back if I'm just buying duchies? And if the answer is not likely, then you might just have to go for provinces. So I guess a question of whether you carriage the wisp here. I would say probably not. Although we do draw into the other blacksmith, which makes it a good decision. Yeah, the lack of plus buy is pretty sad. Yeah, I'm also definitely enjoying the colonnade points, which would make the engine a lot more competitive with just like a moneyish thing. We have a GG in chat, but they are still playing on. Yeah, it definitely seems over. Going down on their own terms, which I respect. So that is 4-1 to Enea. Well played, and yeah, congratulations to them for winning the I tier championships, and good luck to both players in H next season if they're playing, of course. Yeah, thanks all for listening. See ya.